Wonderful people. David Hallet, Fantuzi, Jeannette Khron, Phillipe, Petitte, Mark Elliot and Benny Zable. Thank you all for coming. So, first of all, I'm just going to ask to people to give a short just outline of how they arrived at being artists and what is their art.
My name's Chuk. It is. Thanks, Stuart. My name is David Hallet. I've been in Nimbin since the festival, largely 50 years ago, and it's interesting at the festival because we were all hippies and we all smoked cigarettes then or rollies, and I remember talking to my South African friend Gavin as we were walking up a hill one day, and I said, "Have you got a drum?" meaning a rollie. And he pulled his African drum off his shoulder and gave it to me. And I started playing percussion at the circles that were around throughout the festival. And interestingly, I'd just seen Santana in Sydney before I came to Nimbin, and then they did a late concert after I came back, which just absolutely solidified my love of percussion music. So I started playing percussion, which I'd played for many, many years until my left hand gave out. But I started writing poetry very soon after the festival, working at wheat harvests and such, and then I started organising poetry events. I think the first one was actually here in Nimbin Hall in 1978, and I've been running poetry events ever since then. And while I have forsaken music, much as I love it, poetry is my life is art, for what it is worth, which on some nights is great and other times is a labour of sometime love. Fantuzi.
Thank you. My name is Fungi. I'm contagious and outrageous sometimes. Today I'm dressed in black, as you might see, and that's because Benny Zable was starting us off with some yoga or some workshop out there. And I didn't want to get all rainbowed and, in the way. I just wanted to be an invisible support. And I think that's a piece of life being art. Because life is the best artist. And you may think to yourself, oh no, I dress in a tie, I go to work every day. Well, guess what? That's an expression of art. I started off as a musician. No, I started off as an actor on Broadway in 1963 when I saw some theater there on Broadway shows, and I fell in love with theater. And the gentleman that took me there said, oh, you want to do that? And I said, yeah. And so that evolved after touring with a Shakespearean theater company to dance, touring the world with a dance company called the Rainbow Gypsies. Most of them were outrageous gay guys, and it was a wild, fun ride overland to India. And then music somehow just wanted to steal the show of my life and be expressing through my life in the art of music. And everything is music, and you are music too.
Hello, good afternoon. My name's Jeannette. I was Jeannette Raintree in my lovely years here in Nimbin in my early days. Hello. I was brought up next to a Triassic wilderness, for which I'm eternally grateful. It was a complete inspiration for my life, being close to a pristine wilderness. It was over 250 million years old. I had a nature wonderland playground, and at a young age I started doing bush regen because I could see how the bush needed to be helped along from the white invaders, but I was brought up in dance. My mother was in the early Australian ballet, and I started dancing at 3. and I was passionate about dance, and I did many shows and many companies, and of course I was a young hippie, so I came up to live up here when I was 20, and I got to have there must have been about 10 people living on my property in the end down at Coffee Camp. David was one of them, and we had the Rainbow Players, and we used to write all our own material and perform radio plays, and it was a wonderful time, growing gardens, living naked a lot of the time, and we had Coffee Camp Hall, which we used to rent around the corner for $5 a week, where we could do all our rehearsals. And I left Nimbin in the late 70s and went out into the world and ended up doing a fine art degree in sculpture. I'd incurred spinal injury when I was fairly young, which put paid to my dance career. So I found that translating it into sculpture was the next best thing. And I became incredibly passionate about sculpture. I've worked in many different mediums. And I continue to be a sculptress today, and it's so wonderful to return to this town and have this infusion of the people who started here in the early 70s, and to see how the community's grown and the richness that's here is really inspiring, and I'm so glad to be here today.
My name is Phillipe Petitte, and when I was a kid, I learned by myself to do magic, to juggle, and to walk on a tightrope. And then a few dozens of years after starting, I put a wire illegally between the towers of Cathedral Notre Dame in Paris, and in 73 between the pylon of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and in 74 between the highest towers in the World Trade Center in New York City. In 1973, I was invited as a street juggler to appear in Nimbin, and 50 years later, I was invited again, and Benny Zable, who is able to move mountains for me to be able to come here. And just for you to know, on Sunday at noon, I will be street juggling at the basketball court, just a few yards from here.
Thank you. I feel like I'm sitting amongst mountains, actually. Speaking of mountains, these guys have achieved amazing things in the arts. And Nimbin is full of creativity. And I was drawn to Nimbin by my mother, Mira, who started the Birth and Beyond group. And she moved up here, and some of us kids followed her here. And I had an incredible rainbow discovery of music and life and creativity, and then I sort of denied it, and I went back to the city after having learnt to play the tin whistle and then the saxophone very improvisationally. I went back to the city. I was drawn back to study glass blowing, but also in a way because I felt I needed to rebel against the sort of hippie ethic that I'd been growing up with. But it stuck with me, and I've never been able to kick it, actually, and coming back here, that has really reinforced that for me, just how important alternative culture is, and how so much of it has been very forward-looking and really anticipating so much of what's been happening recently and what's going to happen in the future. And I think I've grown up with an improvisational ethic about life that has come from that sort of alternative upbringing, and I bring that into my art, into my music practice, and into my glass blowing practice. And I now live in Sydney, where I teach and glass blowing. And I've just written a book called Essence of Cloud that I'm very happy about, which is a sort of a glass blower's perspective on a kind of fantasy. And I live there. I've got two wonderful kids, and my partner Manjeet, who's also very creative and does lovely ceramics. So I feel very lucky to be surrounded by creativity in my life, and because many people don't have that luck. Thank you.
My name is Benny Zable / Zany Bubbles. I've been very fortunate, and also it came out of a very unfortunate situation. First of all, I'll do the fortunate. I've been fortunate to be able to perform in the streets because of the conditions that I was put under the mainstream educational system. What took place is that I was brutalised in the third form by a teacher, drew blood, and I asked if I was traumatised from that, and I ended up working 5 years in a factory. I wanted to be an architect. I ended up then wanting to be an artist. So in the end, at the age of 21, I dropped out and I went travelling, and I sketched and drew and got involved with the alternative scene in London and travelled around Israel first and kibbutz, and I saw war. I saw a plane fly over, drop bombs on the Golan Heights, and then the kibbutz took us out to see what was happening out there. And what can I say? Anyway, what happened then is that I started to move towards being an activist. And the activist side of things grew into what I do now full time, pretty much. I have a studio to do all this, luckily here right in Nimbin, so I'm blessed. That's all I could say.
Could each one of you just talk about the philosophy and the inspirations that have led you to where you are in your arts today? Like, what have been the people, the places, the inspiration? I know Jeannette talked about nature, and that's probably the biggest inspirer of us all. But, beyond that, and as well as that, tell us about why. Like, for instance, with David, I know David a little bit. I know he went to university, probably could have done any money-making job he ever wanted to do.
I was meant to do law.
That's right.
Would
That
have been
what I
black sheep
thought.
of the family. Was meant to do. He then decided to do arts first, and then arts law, and somehow I came to Nimbin, and that was the end of all that nonsense. There are two prongs to my thing with the arts. One is the Nimbin School of Arts here, where we are, which I've been the president of for more than 30 years. And the other is poetry. And as I say when I do shows in school, when I was at school, I say to the kids, you weren't encouraged to write poetry, and you only ever studied dead poets. And it wasn't until I was working on the land, I was picking grapes on the Murray, and I hitched on down to Adelaide to stay with some friends, and the Adelaide Arts Festival was on, and he took me to see poets reading their own poetry. And I'd never seen this before. Live, original, in fact, in many cases, new poetry. I started writing immediately. That next day I hitched out of Adelaide. I was working at a cotton harvest out in the Northwest Plains. And I've spent 5 summers working at wheat harvest in a lonely little tin shed out in the middle of nowhere, except with a silo, and old cock is thinking you were some crazed hippie. And I started writing poetry then. But to me, in a lot of my activism, the wonderful thing about poetry is that I've been a very well-respected, in inverted commas, poet in schools where I'm allowed to say anything. I can go in front of students, and because I'm the poet, not a teacher, I can say anything. So I like to be an activist in that thing, to try and open their eyes to political and money and media and climate chaos and the environment, with even tiny poems like this very, very tiny poem, which I think is 25 words. What if the lights go low, the trucks stop trucking, the heat is off, American Pie, the shelves run dry? What if you couldn't buy little poems or big poems? The other thing very much, and I've just loved writing and performing poetry, as I have done for many, many, many years, nearly 50 years. The other thing is the School of Arts, and the interesting, and I was just commenting the other night, some of the locals were saying how they were sick of all of this nonsense and this Mardi Gras and festival stuff, and when were they all going to go away? And it took me back to the festival 50 years ago, and the film of that time, which was where the old straight, as we called them, people who lived here, thought, when are they all leaving? That's all very well, and it was good for the business of the town, and a lot of the businesses sold a few months after the festival. When are they all leaving? And then 10 years later, in 1983, there was a 10-year after festival, and the original hippies weren't happy about that at all, and when are they all leaving came out again, and hearing it again yesterday from some of the locals, it was the same thing. And yet wonderful of the vital things here has been, over the years, the injection of different people in the arts community. German people who came here, French people who came here, Belgian people, artisans and craft workers and musicians. And people say, you know, Nimbin is a very creative place. I mean, not everyone is creative, but there is an incredible population of artists and performers here and exhibitions. And it's wonderful having these exhibitions here in the hall at the same time as performances. So to me, the real lifeblood of this place is the ongoing healthy arts of this funny, strange, radical village. Fantuzi.
That was great. Come on, give him a big hand. That was amazing. In fact, would you make more noise than you thought you could ever make for the hell of it? Come on. Woo! Okay, that's a street theater trick when more people now will start coming, you see? Oh, anyway. I did go into street theater, but before that, as I was saying, I went into classical theater with Shakespeare at 12 years old. But very quickly, the years went by, and the late 60s were happening. And I was still a theater person, inspired by the Living Theater. Anybody here heard of the Living Theater? Yes, those people, I got super close. In fact, I moved into one of their apartments in New York City, in Soho. So I was inspired by them, but I was working with the group. Our group was called the 6th Street Theater Group. It's the 6th Street Theater. And it was political. And we had to do the theater, like, at the same time looking for cops. Because instead of, like, being stuck to the bullshit that they are given in the papers and in the news on television, we were telling them the truth about what was going on. And the police didn't allow that back in those days. So as soon as we saw the police, we said, goodbye, and we would take off and then meet up again and do it again somewhere else. But in 71, by 71, I was already, you know, a yogi. I was inspired by yoga from India. I had a couple of teachers, and I was doing yoga a lot. And I decided to travel to other places because I got bored with America. It was the same, you know. I hitchhiked without $1 in my pocket to every state in the United States 3 times. And all of a sudden I said, does anybody have any ideas for me where to go? And they said, yeah, go to London. It's like $99. So I put my guitar up and I said, $99, anybody? And someone bought it, and I went on a trip to London, and I ended up with the people that was putting on Glastonbury Fair, the very first one in 1971. So they gave me this big giant tent there, and all of a sudden in the middle of the night showed up this group called the Rainbow Gypsies. Now these guys were crazy as crazy could be, very, very sexy, and very trippy, and but they did yoga every morning, and they also did full moon ceremonies, and they never stopped for too long. They traveled. And when they met me, they said, "You're one of us. You may not know it, but you're coming with us to India." So I thought it sounded good, and I did. But art, places, people. Oh my God, India influenced me so strongly that I became more like a spiritual theater group. And I had my own group after the Rainbow Gypsies. And we came here in 75 and was hired by Johnny Allen to do Canberra 75. And I had 6 cars full of freaks. And we did our theater. Within the theater, we had music, we had dance, and we had 4 guys who were all named John and all played bass. It was kind of weird, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot from all the people. I learned a lot from watching Jimi Hendrix. When I saw Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, and even before that, I said, that's it. That's what I want to do when I grow up. And I don't believe that I'm doing it, but I'm doing it in my own way. And I think that's important for us to know, that life is wanting to do art through each and every one of us, and in a unique way. So don't be shy. Don't be bashful. Be bold as love. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I'm going to return to that Triassic wilderness of my childhood. I experienced ecstasy in the bush from a very young age, an utter beauty, and being able to lay down on a rock surrounded by the magnificence of creation and just disappear into it. So that became, I don't like to use the word addiction, but the keynote of my existence. And because I'd had this experience, my husband said that I was hopelessly infected with wilderness. That
Is that Paul?
no, that was another husband. And I said I just was always, I could really notice how civilization, as we call it, in brackets, was destroying too much of this that I'd known to be sacred. And so at a very, very young age, I lived with a whole bunch of us young hippies from the neighbourhood in the national park in Sydney, Dobroyd Point, and there were some old fishermen's and migrants' huts down in a place called Crater Bay. And already this beautiful Hawkesbury sandstone region of Sydney had been infiltrated with European weeds. So we made it our task to get out all the weeds, and we found this beautiful stone well that had been dug from a seep hole in the rock, so we had fresh water. And so I became very passionate about bush regen. I already mentioned that, but even though I was a performer and I was dancing in companies, and I ended up joining the Margaret Barr Dance Company, which was dance theatre, and they used to do satires on society, and I thought society really needed satirising and shaking up and shaken down, and so that was a real inspiration for me. I finally left and went around Australia and went up through the centre when I was young, and arrived in Nimbin because for some strange reason I come from a surfing family, and my father was a financier in the city. He bought a property in Coffee Camp in 1972 because my brother used to come up here surfing at Byron in the late 60s, and Dad said he wanted a property. He'd come off the land, and my brother said, well, the Northern Rivers is a really great place. So he bought this 100 acres in Coffee Camp with an old farmhouse and bananas and a barn for $13,000. Anyway, I was going around Australia, and I was up in Darwin living on the beach with thousands of hippies who were coming off and leaving for the hippie trail. And that's where my French partner and I were intending to go. And we're camping on the beach there, and all these hippies came up, arriving from down south, and they said, oh, there's been this incredible festival in this place called Nimbin, and everybody's buying land and they're going to make the alternative society there. And I went, Nimbin? That's where my dad's bought 100 acres. Hey, bugger the hippie trail and being a voyeur on other people's cultures. I'm going to go to Nimbin and be involved in the creating of our own. So we turned around and we came to the property. In fact, we were arrested by the police in the north of Brisbane. It was the Joe Jelke Peterson days. And we had an old Renault that I'd painted the Rolling Stones' tongue on the front of it, you know, the mouth and the tongue. So it looked like it was lapping up through the desert. Anyway, they arrested us and they went through everything, and then we had a personal escorting to the south of Brisbane, and they said, the border's that way, go that way and don't come back. So we did really quickly. So it was delightful to arrive in Nimbin, and I really felt there were lots of my people there, people who had disquiet and discontent with what society was doing to our planet and to our culture and to our society. It was just so heartening to be amongst company. And before too long, I was very involved with the Rainbow Players and making puppets and making sets and making costumes and choreographing dances. And it was a very rewarding experience, as you probably know, doing community theatre where everybody puts in their best and you all do it together, and I think you'd get a much more profound product than perhaps just a director. So that was a very heartening experience. Yeah, that was my origins, but is that enough? It was very hard for me to have to give up dance. In fact, it broke my heart. And something that I'd been with since I was a child. And I had a beautiful mother who was a singer and a dancer and an artist. So I'm really grateful to her too for everything she taught me. But it was wonderful to discover sculpture because I felt that I could put all of my passion into that, and I've tried to also, for my art, to make comments and statements about our society and culture, as particularly the environment. And I think one piece that I sold, which had 4 elements to it, which I called Post-Tree Museum. I'd been doing some bush regen up in the bush at the back of Upper Wilson's Creek, and I'd been pulling all these old fence posts over 100 years that had fallen down with rusted barbed wire on them, and the rainforest was coming back. And while I was there, I thought, gee, they're really beautiful, those old weathered fence posts. So I pulled them all out, and we pulled out the barbed wire, and we took them down to the shed. And then I had this vision of these little bronze rainforest trees growing out of the top of them. So we put them in a steel footing, these beautiful old posts, and I had little bronze rainforest trees on top of them, and we wrapped all the old barbed wire around the footing, and I called it Post-Tree Museum. And it sold really fast at the Byron Bay by the Sea sculpture exhibition, and I was really happy that it had an impact, and I hope people paid attention to the fact that we're destroying our forests.
Well, passion and inspiration have been with me from the beginning of my life. When at 4 years old, I decided to rebel against authority and to start breaking the rules as a young self-taught artist. I had the luck in Paris to become almost the mascot of a group of famous artists, musicians, painters, sculptors, movie makers, dancers, and they took me to their parties, and I was doing magic, and I was a little bit of the mascot at the time, to the point when I was a teenager, Picasso invited me to perform on a high wire for his 90th birthday, and after that, of course, I started touring around as a magician, as a street juggler, and as a high wire walker. And talking about inspiration, I think inspiration is not something that falls from the sky on top of your head. It's something that you generate by your passion and something that you seek. And if you are passionate and if you are inspired, then as a performer, you will inspire other people. And I am very happy to be a representative of the high wire walking profession, having not been born in the circus. I am not interested on the wire to make you afraid or to prove a certain technical superiority. It's almost the opposite. I like you to look at how effortless and simple it is for a human being, after millions of hours of rehearsal, to walk in thin air. And when I do a big walk or even a medium walk or an appearance in the sky, I have the joy of most people coming after the performance saying, Phillipe, we were with you on the wire. We were not afraid because your confidence was contagious. And you know what? Now we believe we can move mountains. So inspiration should be taught in schools.
Yeah. Listening to all you folks, all of you have brought up theatre, and it suddenly occurs to me that a lot of my inspiration has come from theatre, from my father, Tim Elliot, who was an amazing Shakespearean actor, amongst other things, and he was a great storyteller. When we were kids, he used to make up stories, which is probably also where my improvisational kind of focus started as well. He would pace the floor and drive us into a frenzy of anticipation for the next episode of a story that he was making up on the spot. And that storytelling kind of thing is a real bug I've got, particularly at the moment in my glass work, where I'm trying to tell stories with glass sculptures. But there's lots of things that have given me inspiration. The music of Johann Sebastian Bach, people like John Coltrane, which really, when I was getting into a full-on jazz thing at the conservatorium, I sort of went back to the city and wanted to legitimize myself as an artist in a way. So I've done various courses. I've done a visual arts degree, a research degree and masters at Sydney Uni. But I think I'm self-taught, and some of my education has been kind of water off a duck's back in a way, and I've just kind of kept on with my own path. And so many things have inspired me, the Beatles really when I was young, and Celtic music, which was a way for me to feel as a kind of, I think in a way a lot of us have landed in this part of the world in the last few generations, and we're still kind of not really sure where we belong. And I guess I'm one of those Anglo-Celtic people who still doesn't quite know where he belongs, And I really am in awe of Aboriginal culture and the incredible sense of belonging that's so strong that I can't even comprehend its depth. But exploring Celtic music was a way for me to find some connection with my ancestors, and that was a great inspiration for me. And I've sort of carried a lot of that through into my glass work. And so my glass work, I suppose, I'm doing a lot of teaching and storytelling through glass, and the teaching I'm trying to pass on some of the skills that I've learned to young people, because it's very easy to forget that. We need to bring young people forward into our areas of expertise and try and help them get established. And so I'm trying to do that through my teaching. But otherwise, the huge elephant in the room for me, I guess, has been the whole notion of environment and saving the planet and activism. And I'm still trying to find ways of doing that through my art. I find I can't be very literal, and so most of the time I don't express it, and I want to be braver in the future and express it more. But whimsy seems to be the starting point for me. I have to sort of address things laterally or from a different angle. I can't sort of, be too literal about my feelings about it. But I think all of us artists are now, like most scientists, there's this chorus of people screaming about wanting to save life. on the planet, and there's not a day that goes by I don't think about that and try and find ways to express that through my practice. And yeah, thank you.
I'll track back to my parents. I come from a socialist, Jewish socialist community that was in Poland, a place called Białystok. You probably read my brother's books about it, and so a very rich cultural, unique culture, international. Białystok is where Esperanto came. Anyway, I was part of the Yiddish theatre, so we lived near the theatre. I was living in basically living in the theatre, just like here. It's like a community of people who are interested in performance, in the arts. I don't see art as I see it as a vehicle to get out of situations, problem solving. So I was quite depressed. I suffered a lot of depression. So I would escape and just doodle around and doodle and then get into seeing people, and then it to give me empowered me. So the whole journey with the arts is about empowerment, and my lifestyle, as it is now, is for the environment. Not only that, it's to teach people in silence. That's why I like Phillipe Petitte's work. Through silence, you can speak more to a lot of people than if you use your blah, 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 you know? Because when you do things in silence, you concentrate on expressing with your body, expressing yourself with objects that are prepared where you don't have to scream at people. That is the problem with a lot of our activism. It's just a lot of screaming and shouting. It's very aggressive. So we have to learn how to do actions that are more in silent, and making attention to detail is primary, because that really shows that you're serious about what you're trying to get through to people. So the practice is a everyday practice for me when I get up. You know, what I do is not exactly yoga. It's a type of yoga which I've learnt through I've been blessed to know all these amazing teachers in the world. And my number one was Arthur Turnbull in Melbourne, who started up in Melbourne the unit for dance, but it was unique. He gave me a book when I turned 21 on Dada art. So if you know about Dada, well, Dada is art as art, you know, art is a myth. It's what you express yourself is was an object to get your point across and feel it. Anyway, I just want to say that anyone can be an artist. All they have to do is have a concept, and this concept, or imagine something, and then go and pick up a stick, pick up a rock, and start forming what you want to express. Anyway, I just want to put that.
Okay, so David Hallet just whispered to me, I'll do a poem and Fantuzi might do a song. And I went, oh, okay, that sounds good. So maybe that'll happen.
I'm just thinking what Benny said, and just realising and remembering that Benny's activism was always silent. And a lot of time when you see protests and things on the TV or imagery on video, there's one group of people shouting at another group of people, or being arrested for shouting at the other group of people. Just wanted to say I appreciate the strength of the silence of your thing, of your presentation, of everything you've ever done with protest and activism. And the banner at the front, it's been really striking me the last few days. The hippies were right. Yes, they were, but there weren't enough of us And a lot of people didn't listen, and didn't listen in some ways because we were hippies. And yet things have got much, much worse than anything we ever said 50 years ago, to the brink of where we are now. And that protest and activism can be very gentle. So here's one short poem. The Bridge. Somehow, something has unlocked to pronounce the beautiful words that were frozen in my mouth, lost in my mind, always in my heart. I had put aside to cry out war and tragedy and oppression. She left those sad words behind. She left the machines and the crowd to join the dream catchers in the mist of her mountain den, where the sky walks the land, where the sunlight is singing a river of beautiful words falling through her valley. Fingers of water weaving transparent through the twine of vine, falling through her hair. Raining down brow and breasts and toes where she stands barefoot under the great tree and the immense forest breathing around her. And the day and the night caress each other like a man and a woman in love. And the cool lips of the night whisper, time is not stone. And there is a bridge leaps the waters and the tower of trees. Its path is fern and flower and golden rain, and always, always the bridge is love.
He reminds me of the old poets I would run into in the 60s in Haight-Ashbury, Daniel Moore, Allen Ginsberg, some really deep, amazing people. And I was just a little kid, 16, 17 years old, little punk from Spanish Harlem. And they let me hang out, and I soaked up as much as I could. And now I'm still soaking up, so thank you all for showing up. Because life is art, and it never stops. It keeps evolving. But I'm supposed to sing a song, so I'm not going to talk. I'm going to sing. I get a little bit carried away sometimes. I'll introduce this song by letting you know that I've been bit by a rattlesnake that put me in a helicopter, and I had a death experience, and I spent 3 months in bed without hardly being able to get up. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was trying to knock on the door of music business, and it's not about the biz, it's about the heart. It's about putting all yourself into it and living it, being it. So 3 months of being in bed, not being able to get up, got me straight. So I left LA, and here I am. I need your help, though, because I like doing cooperative things like you were speaking of in the theater, right? So we'll say, life is art. Repeat. Oh, so set yourself free. So set yourself. One more time. Life is art. Life is art. So set yourself free. So we'll divide it like that. Life is art. So set yourself free. This is what art is all about. It's so beautiful. I'm inventing this stuff right now. So here we go. Oh, yes, one more thing. When I go, the hiss of a snake, I want you all to do it. So let me try it one time. All of hell is breaking loose, but if we choose to see the light, the human species is endangered. To save it is our plight. Water is life, can't be polluted. Air essential to all living things. Sun through holes in our ozone layers. Hey, Someone's got to do something. Life is art.
Life is art.
I said, life is art.
Life is art.
Set yourself free.
Set yourself free.
Said, life is art.
Life is art.
Set yourself free.
Set yourself free.
Let's look at the bigger picture and conserve our energy. And for every living creature, there'll be peace and joy plenty. We didn't inherit this earth from our forefathers. Hey, we're borrowing it from our children. And unless we turn this thing around, hey, there won't be a place for them to live and say, life is art.
Life is art.
Set yourself free.
Set yourself free.
Life is art.
Life is art.
Set yourself free.
Set yourself free.
I'll try and pick up on the same kind of vibe that Fantuzi was starting.
You got them going.
Because we were talking about because we were talking about poetry, I should share with you a very short poem, the one I like a haikai they do in Japan, 3 lines, for example, haiku. And I live upstate New York in the forest, and I got there a little poem. It's about being in the forest, and a pine needle falls. The eagle saw it. The deer heard it. The bear smelled it.
The story of how this costume came about was looking into a fire. And at the Manse in Melbourne, it was the Melbourne Arts Co-op. A whole lot of artists lived there, if anyone was in Carlton. Anyway, the idea didn't start off with a costume. It had to start off with paintings, a series of paintings, sort of shaped canvases. And I did a whole series. I did the yellow thread of life. It looked like it turned the wall into thread in and out of this yellow thread. It was the lineal connection, traditional, or something that's connected. Then to liberate is to turn them into an orb that floated off, and all kinds of things happen with that orb. So the fire represents that you go through that dark period. It actually was a thing, the tunnel, the fire, the destruction, the fire, and then but there's this energy that floats off, and what it is a mystery. So that was a concept of Zany Bubbles. Eventually in a costume, which came out of Nimbin after Aquarius, not during the Aquarius Festival, but after. So, I don't think this is going to work. I might. Oh, there's the one. But you see, if you look at a bubble, it goes somewhere, and then it's dropping there, but it floats up depending on if there's moisture in the air, but it floats. And if you look closely, it looks like the planet Earth. It has all kinds of things that goes into my mind, and you get ideas from a lot of ideas. And the kids like it. People look up at it in awe. There's the rainbows, all that. Anyway, I just wanted to explain what this costume is about. It's actually a liberation for me, because when I get in this costume, I can do all this. I get the feeling of just taking off out of the flames, the rise of the phoenix. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to start this next little section with a confession story of my own. I've been a filmmaker for 50 years and did a lot of work with the ABC, and then got addicted to making films on the forest and the destruction of forest and Indigenous peoples, until National Geographic one day said, "Not another fucking tree film." So then we sort of thought it was our time to sort of pass the baton to other people when that was said to us. But I didn't want to talk about that. I really wanted to talk about the fact that I'm now 75 and I'm thinking, well, maybe I've done it all now. Maybe I could just let it go. Maybe the rest of my life is a process of letting all that I've done and all that I've been go, little bit by little bit. And that included my filmmaking really too, because I've been involved for 4 or 5 years making films on the stolen generation, and it's kind of come to a bit of a stalemate where I've just had to sort of let that go too for one reason or another. So I just really thinking about this. Then I went to an Aquarius meeting and about 6 or 7 months ago, and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, well, maybe. And then that night I went to bed and I started dreaming about all the things that it could be. And I thought, well, I don't think my creative days are quite over yet, because maybe we've got to help to make that happen. So here I am in another incarnation, helping to create this festival for us all. But I just wanted to talk about it in regard to ageing, fear and trust.
Thanks, Jenny. That's very interesting questions. I mean, being an artist is a wonderful thing and a terrible thing. Like everything in life seems to have its polar opposites, and as wonderful as it absolutely gets, there's the other side of that as well. And I think there's very tough aspects of it. Having a family and being an artist, the selfishness of being an artist, the fear of being an artist and of having the terror of having to perform. The other night at the cabaret, I was so stressed before I went on stage, because I've been going on stage for so many years now, and my expectation and my standards in myself are very, very high. So that can really rack you and play on your nerves before you actually have to go on, and the longer you're waiting, and it can really play. And I stuffed up that bloody poem I did the other night, and everyone's told me how wonderful it was, except I left half of it out and somehow linked myself and crawled back to where I should have been, sort of in the latter part of it. But I think it's a wonderful, and it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing on families. All my kids have actually had to grow up to be adults to actually appreciate that their father is a poet and deeply respect me for that. Whereas in all those years when I was heading off most nights of the week to play music or to go to rehearsal or do gigs at Byron and Ballina and over at the coast and coming back in the middle of the night and missing whole nights with them, I think that's a tough side of it as well, and just the poverty of being a musician or a poet. And I think what Jeannette was saying, and I've known quite a few dancers, and often dancers have a very short life as a dancer and move into something else wonderful like sculpture. And musicians, a lot of musicians I know, ultimately get sick of playing in bands and having to deal with the egos of other people, and their life can be shorter. The wonderful thing I say to people about being a poet is you don't have to retire. You can actually keep being a poet, whether you're a performing poet like I am or have an ability to write. And honestly, a lot of people say, as they say to poets, what have you been writing lately? Or are you writing much at the moment? And I'm not. I think in some ways because things are getting to such a desperate level that it concerns me. And I don't want to write negativity. I don't want to write the dark world as much in a lot of ways as I have done in recent years. I have a huge repertoire of poems in my memory that I work, and not just my own, but other people's poetry as well. But I think being a poet, as I said, I'll come back to the beginning of it, is a wonderful and it's a terrible thing because you're carrying the burden of your own artistry and carrying the horror of what this mess of a world that we live in as well. And yet it's riding onto this thing which we all love and hanker to, which is love. And it's a difficult thing to somehow let that thing shine and overtake the greed and the madness and the war that's out there. And we are so fortunate in this country, it's ridiculous. That's all I'm going to say.
Give that to Jenny.
Thank you for asking about such important things. Aging, fear, and trust. I'm not sure what to say, so I have a little piece of paper over here because I forget everything. That might have something to do with my age. But I keep hearing stories about when I was younger, I was like, you know, not only jumping around like I do now, but I was doing backward flips, playing my guitar. I don't remember that. You know, I don't even see how that's possible. But whatever they say. No, I don't know. I don't do any more flips. I stopped diving off of cliffs. I broke my neck, had a neck brace for 9 months. You know, there's been a lot of crazy things that I've done that I'm paying for as an elder. Like somebody playing volleyball fell on my knee, hyperventilated, and Lord of mercy, the knee thinks I'm 108 sometimes, you know. I'm like, wait a minute, you're not done yet. You know, and it's only just popped up because I got to do a lot of crazy athletic things as a young man because it doesn't, you know, the body reacts differently to injury. And you have to pay sometimes when you're older. And then as you get older also, so aging can be troublesome, you know, and you feel sometimes distant. For instance, when I play at some festivals or concerts, there's like 100,000 people or 20,000, 5,000, whatever the number is. I'm the oldest dude in the whole place. You know, I remember when I was the youngest, hanging out with Timothy and all those crazy people, Baba Ramdas. And sometimes I think to myself like, well, maybe I'm done. I did buy a little piece of property in Hawaii, and it might be time. You know, I planted all my trees already, so, you know, they're sprouting, fruiting, and then I show up here, and it's a whole other universe, you know, and the little voice inside me that I followed all my life is saying, you're not done yet, because they think you're Obama, but don't let them know you're not. Because after this, I'm doing that and that and that and that and that and this, and it's averaging 200,000 miles, 12 countries a year. I don't even understand how the hell that's possible. But I am kind of getting, you know, that little pandemic break that we all got. I got so comfortable with that, you know, when I get on one of these long-distance planes where you go all the way around the other side of the world, you're in a plane for 14 hours, 18 hours, ouch. You know, I find how I can buy a ticket that I land somewhere like Fiji on my way here and spend a couple of days in Fiji. So, you know, we find our ways around the new person that we are becoming as a person of age or as an elder. And I trust in the universe that she's got it all covered. you know, and I don't need to even think about it. And when the right time comes, instead of being old and you know, not being able to walk or whatever, I'm going to be stronger than I've ever been. I'm going to become more flexible than I've ever been. And then just go out of the top of my head like the yogis do when the time comes. It's like, time to go. Okay. Nobody said that I have to die, you know, weak and, you know, crippled. So that's my plan. And I want to thank you all for going to a festival where, at least yesterday when we were all together with the elders, that I was the youngest or close to that.
Well, it reminds me, my brother still surfs Wadigo's beach every morning at dawn, and he's 75. And a couple of the guys in the Wadigo's club they have there, the Malibu Club, have died on a wave. And I just reckon that's a terrific way to go.
Especially if you're a surfer. Right?
Yeah, especially if you're a surfer. And aging is delightfully surprising. Physically, there's massive changes, but it's a part of your whole life, because every decade there's changes. And in my spiritual inquiry and search throughout my life, concepts like surrender and let go and compassion and truth and honesty, these are things which grow in us as we get older, and they become the mellow wine of our souls. And it's so delightfully surprising. You know, in our society, there's so much activity and marketing that goes on around this youth-addled perpetuation, which is kind of ugly and tragic, really. It's a huge industry. And I think beauty and love, they only get better with age. And they go deeper, and they go truer, and they are that's what carries us over to our death. And death, like birth, can be... I was with a master once who reckoned that dying was the biggest rush of all. So I'm kind of counting on that. If I can surrender enough and let go and be present to what is, I'm hoping to ride that wave right on out of here.
Aging, fear, trust. I don't believe in aging. I think it's a human invention. I know some teenagers who are already dead. Some of my best, youngest friends are 95 years old. So aging is something that you can put in your head if life is not pulling you by the sleeve as it should. In my profession, people are amazed. I am 74 years old and I'm still walk on a tightrope. And they said, you know, how do you do that? And I said, when I was a 18 years old, rebellious little kid learning to walk the high wire, I had to prove. But at 74, after a long life on the high wire and not knowing what the word to retire means, I am actually much more in power of my art, much more in control. Yes, I cannot do the somersault anymore. My body is less supple and less strong, but I have acquired a strength of the soul and a strength of my art, that now my art is more powerful when I have nothing to prove than it was when I was a little rebellious 18 years old, which brings us to trust. People ask me, how can you walk on a tightrope without any safety of any kind? And I think, well, when I put the first step on a wire, and start carrying my life across. I never risk my life, but I carry it across. I will never walk across that tightrope if I were not sure that the last step will be successful. I am not here to die. I am here to live and inspire people with the beautiful act of flying for a human being, which brings us to trust. What makes me sure that I can walk the wire? Well, it's not just a figure of speech or something in my mind. It's body and soul. It goes together. If you know that you can do it, your body is going to obey you, you know. And trusting yourself, it's not an egocentric way of being. It's a very noble, very beautiful chemistry. You have to trust yourself, and it brings me to the way I have lived my life still today is I follow my intuition. Another thing that is not taught in school, but believing in yourself, trusting yourself, and following your intuition is probably the best way for an artist to progress instead of repeating yourself. So anyway, regardless of your age, continue to walk the tightrope of life and to trust yourself, and you will enjoy life and you will inspire people.
I'm sure you couldn't do your kind of art without trusting yourself. It'd be impossible. And in a way, all art involves some sort of a tightrope, even if it's just wondering if you're going to play a wrong note next. I sort of, about aging, middle-aged white guy, it freaks me out. It's not how I see myself. But of course we all age, and it's one can very easily get insecure because as an older person, you're either some sort of a guru or you're a useless has-been, you know, and there's a fine line between the two. And Lisa Yates and Neil Pike and I were sort of talking about that stuff outside in the street earlier on. And, you know, there are people who just push themselves or are pushed by those around them into continuing to perform long after the use-by date when they can't sing in tune, they don't even know what they're doing anymore. And there's people who die tragically young when they seem to have so much more to give, which is what I felt about my father. But one thing I did learn from my father is and I have to remind myself from time to time, on the face of it, I'm a fairly humble sort of guy, a fairly humble sort of artist. But underneath, I've got this voice pushing me on, telling me I want to make a mark. I want to be successful. I want to leave a legacy. I want to have to mean something and to be important to the world. But I remember my father once said to me when I said to him as a kid, you know, how do I become important in my art? And he said to me something like, that's not your business. Get out of the way of that shit. Just do your art. Just do the best you can do with what you have. That's somebody else's business to decide whether you're important or not. I mean, and that's true. And that's how I try to keep reminding myself of that I'm a tiny little speck of sand in this whole world. And I've got to give every little bit of passion I've got about life, which is this most fantastic experiment. And I don't understand how anyone could get bored of life because it is so fucking exciting. I just can't believe how amazing this life is, this world. It's so extraordinary. And I guess that's what I try to convey through my art as well, is that passion. But I have to keep reminding myself, of course I'm not going to live forever. And we just do what we can, you know. We do our best. Oh, yes, sorry. And can I just say for a moment, I really admire your incredible commitment to your art and your practice and your activism. I used to think that everyone should change all the time, but people sometimes stick to their guns, and I really appreciate that. Decade after decade, you fight the way, and delivering important messages. You know.
There's a reason. There's a big reason. Besides, have people experienced trees singing to you? When I was at Middlehead, I wasn't on anything. You know, I don't take any drugs. And mind altering. I did occasionally a mushroom here and there in Nimbin, and people took me out on LSD sort of exploration things. And I'm not a smoker. I don't like smoking. But besides that, at Middlehead, I heard the trees singing, "Down by the waters, the waters." It just was sort of, there was nobody inside, but it sounded like all these trees were singing that song, and Middlehead. And anyway, I just sort of wandered out there and hugged the tree, and I was arrested. That's happened at Middlehead. And it was a picture of me, and I was in my bubble costume too. It was a sort of a strange experience. But life is a mystery, you know. I mean, I'm feeling like I'm a 25-year-old at the moment. I mean, I feel really good, huh?
Hold the mic.
Okay, well, I feel really young and strong. I've come off tops of a tripod. I've been pushed and prodded by police off the top of those barrels, you know, and I've bounced back up, whatever you call it. And I feel really great at the moment. That's how it is. Life is a mystery, you know. Sometimes people just sort of drop, and I'm in this position where I'm feeling really, really high on life, especially getting this high wire walk. It was a miracle. I'm telling you, I didn't know how it's going to turn out. I didn't know how it's going to turn out, but it's like I just went to the bank and I had $26,000 in my account or something like that, and then it's just sort of I've got them to do all the things, and then I rang them up, and that was lucky because it was either then or not at all for them to come over. So I got them, and they explained, because the bank was sort of nervous that this other guy in Florida they were suspicious. So they did this whole investigation in the meantime through all these channels. Anyway, they let the money through, and voila, we have Petitte. I can't believe it. That's easy. I met them. There was a mission that I met those two. I just happened to have met those two within 1 month when they let me back into the States after 5 years being banned because I did not. I got married to Marsha. It was 1 month over my visa, and that I was not allowed in because I stayed longer than my visa. I just had to tell you that. So I said, life is a miracle. It's a big mystery, and what I'm doing now is it seems to be my mission, and I feel really great. So this here I've met a lot of scientists, and in my art, through my journeys, especially in New York City, and I work for EcoFest, our Westside Cultural Centre. Sort of, that's the other side of things. I was doing things there to help with getting these festivals going with my flags and banners and all that, to craft so people were attracted to the events. And so, concepts, ideas. I'll go Yoko Ono. I mean, I watched her do her thing, and she's a conceptual artist. She has an idea and then she makes it into something. It's amazing stuff. Yeah, anyone can do it. It's just got to think like that. And because we're here having Nimbin now, I copied the Imagine in Central Park, and it's the exact copy. It's right there. And the reason why it's there is a number of reasons. First of all, we've got a war memorial, which remembers the past, and we have to remember, it's really important we know what war does to people, but we must build a culture of peace. And a culture of peace is coming about by putting ideas and process. And the Imagine in New York City, people come to puts in people's head, anyone wandering by, and I see in Nimbin the same thing, it inspires people to get out of situations and do things, and that is a sacred space for me. There's a history for it. If you know the Aboriginal, a bit of the Aboriginal culture here, you had the men's, women, the women's over at Blue Knob, and then you had the men's over at the Nimbin Rocks, and then you had Tunnable Falls, it's sort of an initiation ground, down to the falls. You know, people go down. That's in the Aboriginal culture. So that was explained to me by anyway, it was explained to me when it was doing that ceremony at the opening the Imagine. And I just want to say, you know, thank you for having me.
I think Mira's still here. That's Mark's mum. And she always said a very challenging thing, which Paul and I have taken up quite a lot, that everything is perfect. Quite a hard one. Just got to find out how it is really, because some things don't feel at all perfect, but there you go. So I've just got a little story to share. Oh, there's Mira. Wise as ever. Did everyone hear that? Wait on. Here you go. No, you say it.
Okay. Fear is F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. And whenever I get a bit fearful, I think of that and it just all goes away.
So there's my next challenge for Mira, to think about that one for the next 10 years. Thank you, Mira. I've just got a little story, and this will be the last question to everyone at the end of it. I'm sitting with Lorian, who's Paul's grandson, in front of a kind of a kung fu-y type thingy thing on the telly, because he doesn't have telly and so he likes telly. And we sit there and talk basically through everything. And this kung fu guy said, "You will reach your full potential." And he looks at me, he's 5, and he says, "Nana Jen, what's reaching your full potential mean?" And I go, "Well, you know, we're all born with really special things, and we're really born with, you know, things that we can achieve and things that we can do. But in order to get there, we need great family, great friends, great community, great teachers, great inspiration. But we can do it. You know, if we get all those things and a bit more help, we can reach our full potential." And he said, "What's your full potential?" Oh, now it's getting a bit harder. And I said, "Well, you know, no, a bit of bullshit. I think I'm here to spread light and love to the planet." And he said, "Do you think you've done that? You've reached it?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'm a long way from doing that." "Oh, okay, back to the movie." But I just wanted to ask a question in final thing of, okay, you're looking at that 5-year-old child and you're trying to pass on your knowledge and your life and your experience to them. What do you say?
What do you say? Gosh. I don't know, to the 5-year-old, I'd probably scare him if I talked about poetry. He'd say, "What is poetry?" I think you've just got to give them all the attention that you possibly can, especially speaking as a father who is out a lot of the time. I'm trying to be there for the grandson that I have who's 8 and needs that love and attention and encouragement, because things are going to get very, very weird. We've been very, very fortunate up to the time of my 70s as to what's happening in the next 70.
What do you say to those beautiful young ones who are the gift of this wonderful life that continues I keep hearing louder than screams in my head saying, it's not what you say, it's what you do. Because just like everyone, all these animals, you know, you can say, you can curse at them in the sweetest way, and if you really your intentions are good, are loving, they feel that. And if you're afraid or whatever, you know, it's all super, like behind the words that we say. But when I feel really, really bold, you know, I might say something, but I'm really learning more from my grandchildren than I am teaching them. But there was one part that came to me when one of them was playing baseball, and that ball was coming at him, and he went to catch it, and he caught it like this. And of course, he missed it. And so, you know, I wanted to somehow inject it, not just say it, not find a way of saying it, but be as bold as love. You can't play baseball like that. That's not the way you play baseball. You got to give it your all. So if I would say anything to the kids is give it your all. Be kind and loving and, you know, with each other. Be considerate. And strength is not like being a bully or showing off. Sometimes its strength is just being still and quiet and being loving and kind.
Well, I had 3 children pretty young, and it was sometimes conflictual for me with my art. But very quickly I kind of learnt that, you know, life is art and our children are the finest clay. And I had the privilege of working in a dance school that I had when I was young. Also, I taught with this beautiful lady here. And I used to let the kids improvise, even though I taught technical ballet initially. I also started the class with improvisation. And when we did our concerts at the end of the year, I would just bring in my favourite music and I'd play it for the children. I'd let them choose which one they wanted for their piece in the concert, and then I'd let them, in their improvisation, determine what it was all about. And then I'd get them to help me do the sets, and then the mothers and the kids would figure out what their costumes were going to be. And some of the parents used to say to me, wow, you know, how do you come up with all of these ideas? It's remarkable. And I go, because the creativity of children is astounding. Absolutely gobsmackingly astounding. And if we didn't siphon children into particular modes of learning, if somehow, I think some schools are trying to do that to potentiate the creativity in children, then we'd have a much more healthy society, I think. And the thing about it is that creativity goes hand in hand with love, because they love to be creative, and love is just the basis of everything. And there's nothing more joyful than a human being who knows love and creativity in their life. It's a beautiful thing.
I will never give advice to a young child because I suffered so much when I was a kid from adults telling me what to do and me doing exactly the opposite. But what I might do is something like this. I will reach to the child here and find a coin, and I will say, look at this. If I put the coin in this hand, you can become a magician. Blow on it. And they will blow, and the coin will disappear. And I said, where is the coin? Well, the coin is dancing, but you don't see it because you're not a magician. So let's put it back in the fist, and now blow again. And they blow, and they make the coin reappear. So my advice will be, never cease to believe in magic. Now go through life, good luck.
I love that. I'm struggling to think of what I would say. You know, in my head were all kinds of things about, you know, I believe that the patriarchal system we grew up in is over and needs to change, and that's not something you could tell a little kid. But I feel like one lesson that I'm learning in my life constantly is that, and I would tell a child, you are the center of the universe. And everyone else around you is also the center of the universe. So just as they're playing a part in your story and your movie in a way, you're playing a part in their movie as well. And I'm still trying to learn that lesson. So I would definitely want to pass that on.
Yeah, the childhood, my traumatic childhood sort of made me think about, it made me think about when I have a child or children, being caught up in the classroom, and it sort of dampens their creativity. You have to get out. So children, I say, look, get out and explore, you know. Explore what's around you, explore within yourself, because there's the internal universe and there's the external universe. There is so much to explore and to grow out of that, and you know, and frame, especially when you express yourself and have a discipline, you know, like, you know, just be your, observe. The observing is very important where you go, but. I just like to leave them alone, you know, and they'll find it. And I like, it's difficult, but I also like crafting visual stuff for people to see and get a feeling of where I like to see them go in that sort of compassion, explore, adventure, you know, through like the bubble series I did through town. That was for everybody to experience that journey and ideas and things to come out and trigger their imagination and whatnot, you know. Everybody's different. Every child is finding a different, their backgrounds are different. It's just like, let them just explore and observe them. And I've seen how the people, the beautiful children that has come out of this community, it's just wonderful, you know, because they become the future leaders from what we do, you know, as people. And for a change to take place, it's very important now that we encourage the children to be active rather than be suppressed by all that stuff that's conspiracy theories, all kinds of things that's laid on by all kinds of, including this thing, you know, the iPhone and all that. I use it a lot, but it draws people into another world. So good to get out of it. Microphone. Huh? Oh, the microphone. Oh, yeah. Hello, microphone. All right. So, I'm sorry. Anyway, yeah, so that's the thing, is to really allow them to breathe and find their own space and inspire them to give them direction as well through the arts, through life, you know, the life experience, your lifestyle. So, so you develop the lifestyle, they live within the lifestyle, and the lifestyle will help them to develop a discipline for their creativity.
So we've reached our time now, which is pretty good for a bunch. Phillipe, Petitte, Mark, Elliot and Zany Bubbles, thank you for being here and for your art.
Two. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks very much. Now, there's some dancing music, I believe, here tonight. So if you could please stack up your chairs, that would really help, and we'll put all that aside and get ready for the next big thing.